Good evening, everyone. And today, for a book review, we're going to be looking at Grady Hendrix, Horrorstor, and my best friend's Exorcism. Alright, now, first off, why am I doing two books at once? Because normally I tackle one book at a time. That's because I just kind of accidentally ended up reading two of them. I ordered Horrorstor whenever I was looking for things that were supposed to be sort of atypical literary experiences to follow up with House of Leaves, which, by the way, fun, a little bit unusual in terms of structuring since it's made like an IKEA manual, but it's still not that different. Like, it's not on the House of Leaves level of difference, so how that was popping up on recommendations as a linked thing, I'm not sure. It's a unique physical format. It looks really pretty, fun to buy. We'll dive into the story here in a minute, but it's not. That's a very poor comparison. And then I was just browsing around a bookstore one day, and I saw the cover for this, and I was like, oh, okay, that looks like the 80s horror movies that I used to see at the video rental store. So we're going to get this and read it. And I didn't even notice at the time that it was actually by the same fellow that wrote this. So I ended up reading this before I actually realized that the two are linked. So I thought it'd be actually fun to do both of them together. Now, clearly they're both horror novels, but there is one thing that seems to be a common thread through both of them that I'm curious if it actually penetrates through the rest of his novels, and that is that it's a little bit campy, which, I mean, if you're a fan of 80s horror, then you should know that a lot of it actually has a decent amount of camp in it. Like, it's pretty irreverential, and very few of them are super serious. Most of them have at least some level of probably unintended humor to it. Maybe a few that are intended. But yeah, so let's start with Horrorstor because it's the one that I read first. So Horrorstor takes place from the perspective of a person that has found themselves basically locked into a cashier position. And if you have been in that type of job for an extended period, you know the sort of sense of a lack of purpose that ends up giving you. So this person is dealing with those issues, and the store is also experiencing some weird vandalism and whatnot overnight, almost every night. Well, she ends out getting inadvertently looped into a group of people that are going to stay overnight at the store, and those people end up finding out that there's a lot more going on than just someone sneaking into the store. But it's a good, if you look through it, like, each of the different chapters are actually named after one of their fictional pieces of furniture. And I don't know if you ever had any experience with IKEA. I have very limited experience with it other than through the website, because the closest one is about 3 hours away. They're a very sterile store that has slightly above the quality of Walmart's cheapest furniture just in general. There's a few things. It ranges, but whatever. That's kind of irrelevant. At the end of the day, the thing that makes this kind of interesting is that mixture of the loathing of corporate culture along with an actually having to deal with the reality of a haunting. And it is actually an interesting story. The other characters are good foils for the main character. She can start out a little bit overbearing, and yet again, if you've worked in any sort of retail like that, you know the type that they think they're too good for the position, which a lot of people really are. But if you've got the job, generally it's better just to have the attitude, you know, I'm there, I'm going to do the work, and I'm going to get my stuff out of it. And she clearly doesn't take that on, and it shows in her general demeanor, at least in the book. But it sort of changes. Like, let's just say that is actually a bit more on the negative trait of it, that there's reasoning for her to believe that, but at the same time, it's the way she interacts with other people that actually changes throughout the story. So there's good character growth, there's a decent character arc, and it's done in an interesting setting in an interesting way. The book is actually not that pricey for something that's in an atypical format. Like, it's about $17 brand new, and usually stories that are books that actually have any level of illustration or that the formatting is any somewhat important to the way it's structured are a little bit more expensive than that. So it's also a nice looking book. So I would recommend it. Now, my best friend's Exorcism. I know there's a movie now, and I believe the movie was I can't remember what network the movie's on. I haven't actually watched the movie. So this is purely related to the book. The book is fun, but even though it says it's about an exorcism, there's some stuff that happens at the beginning that sort of vaguely hints at a potential possession. But it really comes off more like just a Billings-Roman sort of story, where your main character, she's not the most sociable person, at least at the beginning. They have their own little social clique that they form through the middle, but you could actually potentially pretend that there is no possession in this, and that it's just that one of the friends kind of mean girls out. And what happens is someone becomes a social outcast, is someone doing some really horrific things. Now, minor spoilers, but the author and the story itself really kind of confirms that there is a possession, so she's not just being mean. But that's the thing that I found really interesting about the story, is that you could take the possession aspect out of it, and it would still be a really good coming-of-age story about someone maturing, going through some really traumatic events, and how they handle those and grow, and how they even move past those events, because it does follow up. The last little bit of the book actually tells you what happens well after the main events of the story are over. And it's really good. It's just a really good story about personal connections and friendship, and how people, someone really desperately trying to help a friend from really, like I said, you could take it one of two ways. The possession is the actual firm part of the story, but it can also be looked at as a friend trying to help pull another friend back from a darker path that they've chosen. It's really good. It was really enjoyable. Hendrix is very good at actually squeezing in some humor, because there are some humorous things that happen in both of these, especially this one. The dark humor is way more apparent in this. Not as much humor in this one. There is some, definitely, but it's not quite as strong as what it is in Horrorstor. Now, I would recommend both. I've enjoyed reading his stuff. I'm actually going to try to find a couple more of his books to read to see if he actually keeps that same sort of campy sense of humor, but they're enjoyable. I haven't watched the movie for this. I think the few ratings that I looked at wasn't rated super strong, but I have a feeling like in the movie they probably make the possession aspect way more clear than what it is in the book. And I believe that would take away from the story. So if you're looking for maybe some summer horror, since I'm recording this in the summer, or if you're watching this in the fall, these are good light horror reads. They're not going to scare you to any significant degree. Like they're more of a fun, campy horror movie. So if you like something like an 80s slasher, that type of feel, where there's a little bit of tension here and there, but it's nothing that is overwhelming, I would recommend these. And I would imagine, since he's been consistent across two very different books, that the rest of his stuff is actually pretty good as well. Alright, so this was just a quick one. Wanted to throw out there since I've actually read them and they've been sitting around for a little bit without me actually putting anything up for them. The next book reviews probably will be a little bit, because I have to actually finish getting through them first. And as for content for the gaming side of things, still not sure where we're going with that one. Anyway, have a good evening. Thank you for tuning in.